I'm Nicole Auerbach. He's Jordan Cornette. We cover men's college basketball for NBC Sports and Peacock. And Jordan, we have to get together and discuss what we just saw in the first weekend of the tournament. The Sweet 16 is set. And honestly, there's not a lot of Cinderellas, really none. There's 4 conferences represented, and they're the 4 biggest conferences. You've got the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC. The lowest seed we've got is a number 10 seed, and it's Arkansas and John Calipari. And all 4 number 1 seeds are in. So kind of a chalky first weekend.
Yeah, Nicole, I kind of have a little bit of issue with everybody being, down on the fact that there's no Cinderellas in the tournament. I know that's defined the big dance for so long, and they call it madness for a reason because you want those upsets. You want those upstart programs to learn about stories of teams that aren't typically on the big stage. But to me, what really burns me up about it is our sport of college basketball is truly the only one that allows the injection of the casual into this thing and complain about the fact that we have the best teams trying to compete for a championship in the second weekend. Would we be upset if the best teams in college football were playing for the CFP or the best teams were playing in the NFL playoffs to win it all? No, we'd be excited about it. So I'm juiced that we have the highest level teams, the ones who've earned throughout the year. I don't know where you stand on that, Nicole. I just feel like, hey, we're going to have high level basketball this coming weekend, and that's awesome.
100%. And as we did learn with the CFP, people actively rooted against Cinderella. People did not want those teams to win games or prove that they belong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of the exact opposite here. Let's talk about the number 1 seeds, right? Because coming into the tournament, certainly felt like they could all get there to a Final Four. I know it's rare to have like it that chalky, but all 4 get through. 3 of them were tested at various points. Duke was not. That is my national champion pick, and I feel really good about it. Like, this team is so talented. They have so much size. And you and I were talking before we started recording, like, big John Shire fans. Like, this team has it all. And I think barring injury or just like a totally out of character night, I do expect them to get to San Antonio. And I personally still think that they're my favorite to win it all.
Yeah, I mean, look, Duke has been as impressive as anybody, and I don't really see a vulnerability in this group, Nicole. Everybody, Coach Shire didn't get the respect he deserved is probably the safest way to put it, by not getting Coach of the Year in the ACC. And look, Coach Kelsey did a great job. Year 1 in Louisville, we get it. But like, it's almost, you look at Shire and go, oh, well, it's Duke. Like, he's supposed to be good. Well, in the NIL era, a lot of programs are dumping a lot of money into it. You still got to coach high-level talent. And what stands out to me about, yes, Duke is uber talented. Cooper Flagg is at the apex of their talent. But they're so well coached. They don't miss a block out. They make the extra pass. They know when to make the outlet. They always get not a good shot. They get a high quality, the best shot, and it reflects in their field goal percentage inside the arc and beyond it. This group is great. But you're talking about this confidence, Nicole, and I get it. But did you watch Arizona just play the other night? Like, what a game versus Oregon. Did you see? And I know you did. Did you see BYU and Coach Young and how they spread you out with those NBA ideals? That path ain't easy coming out of Newark for Duke. Are you a little bit concerned there?
Not really. Like, I get what you're saying, and those are going to be tough challenges, but it's, I mean, we both lived in the Jersey, New York area. That's going to be a Duke home game. Like, it's the atmosphere, all of that, these guys and the level of, pressure and expectation they face. They've met the moment with all of it. Shire personally has been through so many of these types of runs before. I'm not that concerned. I'm not concerned about the freshmen that they play and that they start. Tyrese Proctor and the level of experience that he brings, and this 2-game tear. He set a bunch of records for his scoring, the 3-point shooting that he's had. He doesn't have to do that. He's probably not going to continue to do that every single game, but like, what that adds to this team that already had so much talent, but to add that level of experience, I just still really, really like them. And this wasn't the region that I was most worried about. I thought Florida, for as good as they are, as talented as they are, as red hot as they were coming into the tournament, I'm more worried about that region, although now St. John's is out of it as the number 2 seed. But like, I still feel like a Maryland and Texas Tech, like some of these other teams in that region could be dangerous. So I still feel like Florida's path, even how good they're playing, and Walter Clayton Jr. coming off an incredible performance against UConn, I still feel like that's the region that I'm most interested in. And just like if Florida does get through it, I'll be most impressed with that number 1 seed coming through and surviving.
Yeah, I think they got their clunker game out. And it wasn't necessarily their clunker game as much as it was how well UConn played.
Yeah.
I mean, UConn hit shots on the back of Liam McNeely going for 20 plus. They were able to neutralize the backboard against that great length and size and athleticism and power down low of the Florida interior. They limited their turnovers. Those things matter in that game, and that's why the margin was so slim, and UConn was positioned at points to maybe steal that one. It was a wake-up call. And sometimes these teams, not Duke clearly in that first weekend, but some teams need a wake-up call to say, hey, anybody can get you. I am concerned about as great a job, and it's an incredible job Coach Willard's done with that group. And what a finish by Derek Queen to advance past Colorado State. And you're not going to call it travel there. Don't want to hear about it.
I'm with you.
But here's what I worry about, Nicole, is as great as they've been, and they've got the most talented starting 5 in this thing, except for maybe Florida's starting 5. But the difference between Florida and Maryland, and it's no surprise I'm going to say this, Florida can tap into their bench. Florida's got a depth there. Now, you're fine playing 5 guys. They're 18 and I guess now 24, 25. We've got to say with college basketball players. But if they get Derek Queen into foul trouble or anybody in that crab 5, who do you tap into to keep up with Florida's firepower? That's the concern.
It's a great point. I mean, that crab 5 scored 70 of the 72 points in the round of 32 game. That's absolutely a factor with Maryland. Quickly on the other 2 number 1 seeds, Auburn had, some lulls, I would say, in some of their first 2 round games. And then obviously, Houston, and I know you and I are both high on Kelvin Sampson, what he built, the way that the style that they play. Any concerns about either of those 2 teams and the way that they advanced?
Concerns. I'm here to tell you right now, Nicole, and my bracket has been better this year than it has in years past. So I say this with a little bit of confidence, maybe some bravado. But I think Auburn goes down. Michigan's going to knock off Auburn.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. I was at the SEC tournament. I watched this team in Nashville, these Auburn Tigers. They're a shell of themselves. And look, credit to them. They got to the second weekend, and those losses they took at the end of the year, we heard Coach Pearl say it. They were against high-level teams, tournament teams, dangerous teams. They're not the same team since Janai Broom's return from injury. They're not the same efficient offense. He's not 100%. He's a great player, but he's not operating at the level they need him to, and that offense isn't either. Now, here's the thing, and it's not laid-up analysis. Michigan needs to make shots. Well, of course, every team needs to make shots, right? But Michigan gets into this lull of their own where if they're not making shots, it's infectious in a bad way to everything with how they approach the game. They don't guard the way they need to. They get reckless a little bit, and they take a tick down. But if those shots are falling with their personnel, those 2 7-footers in Golden and Wolf, Trey Donaldson motivated to play his old squad in Auburn.
And clutch shot after clutch shot for him in every big moment that they've had this year.
Coach May's a hell of a coach, Nicole. I like Michigan. I think Michigan advances here. I expect an all Big Ten Elite 8 matchup coming out of the South.
I was going to say, if it's not Michigan, I think it's Michigan State. That's what my bracket had, pulling off the upset of Auburn.
You think
out of that region as well. Let's talk a little bit about the macro storyline about the Sweet 16 and that there are only 4 conferences represented. It's the ACC, it's the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC. SEC has 7 teams into the Sweet 16, which, like we talked about, the record 14 teams in, but it was very top heavy. And so rightfully so, a lot of those teams got in. There's been a lot of narratives and questions about how we got here. Why are there no Cinderellas? We didn't see an upset from the 13, 14, 15, or 16 seed line in the first weekend. We had 2 12s that won, but they didn't really even feel like upsets. Like, it was teams that people felt good about and matchups that seemed advantageous. I had one of them. We both did on site in Providence with McNeese State. That wasn't a shocker. How do you explain this? I know this is a weird tournament and it could just be this year, but people do want to say, hey, is this the transfer portal? Is this NIL? What is leading to this lack of upsets, the lack of Cinderellas, the things that we love so much about March Madness?
It's definitely a tick, a large tick of NIL has to play a role. Doesn't mean this is going to be the outcome every season. That's not what I'm saying. But if you look at these teams that advance, power conferences with NIL, but that doesn't always say you're going to make – you can have NIL, you can have all that stuff. Look at Kansas State. They're not even in the field. Look at Indiana. They're not even in the field. These are teams that hit in the transfer portal, got the right guys that fit and have paid dividends and are doing it here in the tournament. If you look at these teams, you go, oh, that guy's how do you think Michigan's got here? Where do you think Golden Wolf came from? Like, how do you think Ole Miss got here? Where do you think Sean Padula came from? Like, those are things, they hit. Guys have hit in the portal. They've lifted these teams up. That's why they are where they are. It's coaching, personnel, recruiting still does matter, just in a different way. Not pulling them from high school, pulling them from different programs to fit your identity, and it has, Nicole.
Yeah, it's talent evaluation, right? Like, that's really what it comes down to, and hitting in the portal and getting guys to mesh and be connective. And I think that part's really hard. Bill Self was talking about that actually after Kansas got knocked out, that like basically the pieces that they had, like the talent, the team on paper, he was happy with, but it didn't come together the way that teams need to have success. And obviously, you know, this is like the worst 2-year stretch that he's had at Kansas. But on paper, you still have really talented players. It just didn't work. And so I think that's part of it. But I'll also say that I think it's conference realignment. I think it's conference consolidation. BYU used to be in the WCC. Houston was out of the American Athletic Conference. I really think this all goes back to Butler. The fact that a team from the Horizon League made it to the national championship game, well, then they bumped up multiple leagues. They went to the A10 and then the Big East. Like, they wouldn't count as one of those true low mid-major conferences anymore. And that's happened over and over again. Gonzaga's joining the Pac-12. Like, the way that we look at these teams and where they come from has changed. And so I think it makes sense that, you know, as people have bumped up, in part because of the basketball success, that they're now no longer like coming from these more obscure conferences. You're not getting multiple teams out of the CAA when VCU came out of it. Now the CAA is a one-bid league, and also VCU is in the A10. Like, everything has shifted based on that success. And so I think that's an underrated part of this. I mean, part of the records and all the stuff that we saw out of the SEC is because they added 2 teams that made the tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think another element to that too, Nicole, is maybe this is Houston's best shot because now they have 2 years under their belt in a highly competitive Big 12 where they're continually challenged. A big question for Duke coming in this year, albeit they're coming from a power conference, but a historically bad year for the ACC. Duke hasn't been challenged really. So what are they going to look like? Hasn't mattered yet. But for Houston, they've been battle tested more than they were in their last league. So every battle they're prepared for. They're not going to get shocked at some point. They've been through it. So I think that adds another element to your point. But I can't shake the whole NIL transfer portal hitting thing. When I watched it,
it's definitely part of it. And I think
look at Chesley here. Look at Arkansas.
You still have some of these like 5th and 6th year guys too on these rosters this year. Like, so again, like when you talk about like the gap and the divide, like the rich getting richer, well, some of these teams like in Auburn, like some of these teams in the power conferences are older, or they've added guys who did have great mid-major careers for their final chapter in the power conferences. And that's how you get old.
That's something we haven't heard, Nicole. I think you just tapped it there is they're older guys now. You're absolutely right. So you're getting guys. This moment doesn't feel big for these guys. They're grown. It's not an 18, 19-year-old deciding a lot of these games. I mean, remove Derek Queen, obviously, in his finish the other night. But for the most part, you are getting old guys that are impacting these games that have a lot of minutes logged. So you're seeing a higher level performance. And those older guys are coming from other places to these major
Yes. And they used to finish their careers at their mid-majors, right? Like a veteran mid-major team was the prime candidate to upset a younger freshman laden like Duke or somebody, right? And now these teams were different because a bunch of guys ended their careers in the power conferences. So I think that's part of it too. So that part might reset. The rev share era could also maybe reset some of this. But man, some of the best mid-major coaches also did just take some better jobs. So we'll see what happens next year as well. I want to talk about the Final Four as we're now 2 rounds away from it. There is a lot of chalk. There's a lot of number 1 seeds that are through, some number 2 seeds. You have a 10 seed, but it's Arkansas and it's John Calipari. So I'm going to ask you for a sleeper pick to get to the Final Four, possibly win it all. But I guess there isn't really like, they're probably not going to go out on too far of a limb, right? Like these are all, again, power conference teams. They're all teams that we saw do a lot of good things in the regular season and get here, by merit. So I'll just say here's the rule. Just don't give me a number 1 seed. Give me somebody else and we'll call them a sleeper.
I'd be tempted to then go with like a 2 seed as I look here, Michigan State. But no, I'll give you a legitimate team that, I was talking with a couple buddies and watching them is truly felt like the winner of that BYU VCU game could go on a sneaky run in the first round. And it happened to be BYU. And we saw what they did to Wisconsin. Kevin Young comes from the NBA. He spreads you out. He's got high-level shooters that apply a lot of pressure on a perimeter defense, guys that can exploit gaps, attack a closeout. They rebound well from their position, generate second-chance opportunities. They play with a pace, but they shoot it so well. I mean, they bombed Wisconsin out of this game, 12 threes on 46% shooting. They shot 50% from the field. Richie Saunders had himself a day, and I look at them going against Bama, and there's no advantage for Bama in that game. And if BYU wins that game, I look at them versus Duke, they're not going to be scared. This group is another one, to your point, that is classed up in the conference they're playing in. And in that Big 12, they've seen teams like a Bama. They've seen teams like a Duke. I don't know if they've seen a team like Duke, but they'll be ready. Well, sure they have, Houston. So they'll be fine in terms of that talent, where BYU a year before is coming from, I can't even remember what, the WCC is where they were before. So then it's like.
You only played Gonzaga. You had
all we know is Gonzaga. Well, no, now they played those teams. BYU's been as impressive as anybody in that first weekend. That's a 6 seed to watch out for, Nicole. They could knock off Bama. They could usurp Duke. They could find themselves in San Antonio.
I like that answer, especially because, I love tater tots and the potato element of the backstory for BYU's team. To your point, also, like that is always a veteran team because you always have older guys. They have guys that look like they're 40 and that they sell insurance. Like that's, you feel good about team. When you're watching a game and you feel like somebody looks older than you feel inside, you feel good about that team possibly pulling off an upset. I know you have concerns about Maryland, and we talked about the lack of depth, right? And that so much of it is on the Crab Five, their starting lineup. But that's my team. I just felt watching them through the Big Ten that the talent was there. Like this was a team that was talented enough to get to a Final Four. Yes, they have to go through Florida, and Florida might have been the hottest team in the country coming into the tournament. You
have to be able to adjust on a matchup. You can't fall in love, and then you see a matchup and go, I'm still in love.
I am still in love. I'm still sticking with Maryland.
Even with Florida staring in front of them.
Yes, even with Florida standing in front of them. I just think, like, Maryland was a team, and this is why the Derek Queen buzzer beater was so awesome. First of all, the degree of difficulty on that shot was incredible. The fact that he wanted it and that they got it to him as a freshman. I mean, he was one of the best players in the country this year, not just saying freshman. And so it's an incredible moment. But Maryland had been on the wrong side of finishes all season long. Yeah. So I think there's something that can be gained of all of that experience and the fact that one of them finally went their way. But I just think from a talent standpoint, cohesiveness standpoint, that there's something special there. I think, it's, again, I know it was UConn and they're the defending national champs. They were not nearly as talented or as world beater as they were last year. But they did push Florida, right? Like you still needed some special moments from Walter Clayton Jr. down the stretch to pull off that win. So I have faith in the Terps. I really do.
And I look, I'm with you. I don't think it's crazy. I just walked into this thing and look, recency bias. I was down in Nashville and watched Florida play, and I was like, this Florida team could have maybe stopped one of those national championships from UConn in the last 2 years. They were that kind of good, and they stood out like that to me. Beyond that, I do need to carve out a second to give praise to what I thought was the coolest moment of the tournament. No disrespect to Aura, but Derek Queen, the shot you're talking about, but beyond that, what the genesis of the shot in a huddle. And I can't imagine being in a huddle, being a senior or an upperclassman, and coach going, all right, what are we doing here? And the freshman goes, I want the MFN ball. Like, that's pretty cool for him to say, I'm the guy. And then
yeah, and to your point about the veteran players there, being cool with it. Being like, yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to
Yeah, he's got it.
No, that was awesome. So anyway, I just they have an aura to them, I think, a little bit.
I see what you did there. I hope that aura continues on, because McNeese's aura, I would say it ended there, but it sounds like my man's still making moves and getting paid. So I think it's probably the most. I'll give you this. I can't come over to your side and go with Maryland. I just can't, Nicole.
Okay. All right.
But I think it's going to be a better game than people expect if Derek Queen and that Crab Five stay out of foul trouble. That game could be flipped on its head if guys get 2 and 3 fouls early. It's not going to be competitive. If they stay out of foul trouble, they've got a shot with how talented they are.
Yes. The starting five, the Crab Five, need to stay on the court. So the big picture storylines of the Sweet 16 are, of course, that it's fairly chalky, no Cinderellas, but there's some incredible storylines top to bottom. Jordan, what's compelling to you? What's the most interesting storylines?
Having covered the conference all year and marveled at it, the Big Ten's opportunity to end this 25-year title drought, and ironically, the team that may be the one to do it, the one that I'd like to do it, is the last champion they've had out of Big Ten in 2000, and that's now Tom Izzo's 2025 iteration with these Spartans, because they can win games in a variety of different ways. What everybody looked at was St. John's and said, well, what if they don't make shots? Can they still win games because they're a bad three-point shooting team? Michigan State's a bad three-point shooting team, and they've proven they can beat a high-quality team without knocking down shots consistently from the outside because of how they can guard, bend but don't break. They weren't great defending inside the arc, but they did just enough. They got out in transition when they needed to. There's not one star for that team. So the fact that this drought could end on a year where I kept saying, everyone loves the SEC, and I get it, but I'm watching this Big Ten, and I'm watching some of these teams, and they're going to have an opportunity. And now 4 teams in the Sweet 16, and Michigan State looking like they can beat anybody, and they haven't played their best ball yet. That's the coolest storyline, because conference has been so good, Nicole. They just haven't been able to produce that champion. It'd be nice to see that happen. How about you?
Yeah, and they've had teams in the championship game, including last year, and not been able to cut down the nets. I like that, because I also think that for as good as the SEC has been, I've been just hesitant about the idea of, hey, we've seen the Big Ten send a bunch of teams to this tournament, and then they beat up on each other so much in the regular season, they're not there at the very end. So I think it's possible that that could happen with the SEC as well. Most interesting storyline to me was, you and I were both in Providence, John Calipari taking this Arkansas team to the Sweet 16 in year one, where we were all just fascinated about, him kind of beating the posse out in Lexington, where people were just uncomfortable because they were having early exits in the tournament. So this is actually his first trip back to the Sweet 16 in 6 years. But also, they're 0-5 to start SEC play. They've had a rash of injuries. And for that team to get back to the Sweet 16 by having to go through Bill Self and Rick Pitino was incredible. I mean, if you're Calipari and you're not sure that you have a team that's good or cohesive or whatever, and it's year one in a new place, and you get to say you won in your return to Rupp and you beat Rick Pitino and Bill Self this year, it's a good year. So I think that's super compelling. Plus, then I thought there was extra pressure on Kentucky to also get to the Sweet 16, which they did. So I just think that that's very compelling to me, is, one of the greatest coaches of all time, who is a polarizing figure in the sport, who's coming off a few down years at Kentucky and early upsets, taking Arkansas to the Sweet 16 in year one.
Nicole, co-signature on 10s. I would double back and say that is a massive storyline. Coach Cal getting to the second weekend here. I'll make no secret of it. Coach Cal is a friend. I know him well. I know his son Brad well. I don't know the rest of the family as well, but I know them. I know what this meant to that family.
They were crying. They were in tears.
You have relationships with coaches working in this business. I have a lot of close relationships with coaches. And I think what the common fan doesn't understand is the toll it takes on, forget the coach on the sidelines, the toll it takes on a daughter and Megan Calipari, the toll it takes on an Ellen Calipari, Coach Cal's wife. it didn't end well in Kentucky. And people can put the blame on Cal if they want to. That's fine. They can put it on Kentucky if they want. That's fine. I think there's a little bit on both. But what that does to your family when it gets that ugly, you just want to see your husband or your father be happy and still achieve. And so a lot of people thought he was being sent out to pasture to cash a check there at Arkansas and never to be heard from again. And he spent a lot of the weekend in Providence talking about they didn't quite put the nails in the coffin. I'm still here. And to see that emotion from his wife and his daughter coming out crying. This wasn't the national championship, but it just shows the hardship that this business can have on people that really don't see that side of it. Yeah, they make millions of dollars. Yeah, they live a great life, but that divorce from a place like Kentucky,
15
and again,
years.
there's blame on both sides, but for him to turn around, have success against a guy who just walked into that building and Coach Pitino, and there were tears of joy seeing him in Rupp, to what his reception in Coach Cal's was, to beat that guy, to show that he could still coach, to win with this roster. It was a really cool, humane moment of this whole thing. And one of those stories, it's not going to get that angle covered, but to know that side of it, wow, it was awesome.
It was. And just, I loved when he was talking about the different chapters. He's in a new chapter of his career. Rick Pitino is, maybe chapter 2 of his time at St. John's. And then to beat him like that, it's an incredible storyline. And then Mark Pope to take Kentucky to the Sweet 16 in his year 1 as well.
And then Kevin Young in year 1 says, "Hey, everything's fine with Pope gone. I've got this thing I'm in." So it just goes to show you, coaches,
chain of events.
Changes happen, but it's not like guys don't know how to coach anymore because it either doesn't work somewhere. There's a better opportunity. Like, these guys are all getting here because they're great coaches. They put together great identities for their teams.
So the Big Ten has not had a national champion in this tournament since 2000. Mm-hmm. It was Tom Izzo, Michigan State. When you watch back at the clips, it's a younger Tom Izzo, I would say. When you see the hair color is a little bit different, a little bit more vivacious there. But this does feel, to your overall point, after covering the league all year, that you've got contenders here. Like, there could be a team to snap that streak this year. They have 4 teams into the Sweet 16. You've got Michigan, who's facing number 1 overall seed Auburn next. They'll get the winner of Ole Miss, Michigan State. So they're in the same region. So those are 2 of the Big Ten teams. Purdue has Houston and number 1 seed Houston. And then the winner of Kentucky, Tennessee, if they advance. That game is also, that region's in Indianapolis, which is kind of crazy. Wow. So a lot of Boilermaker fans will be there as they're trying to get through back to the Final Four. And then Maryland is playing Florida, number 1 seed Florida. And then if they win, the winner of Texas Tech, Arkansas. So who is most likely to end this drought?
I'd have to go with Michigan State. I'd have to go with Tom Izzo's group. There's such a connected group, and that's so important in March. You've been playing a lot of basketball to this point, and so guys still being engaged. Obviously, they're playing for a championship, so you would think that's there with every team, but there's no one guy that's being pushed to the front with Michigan State. There's no first-team all-conference guy on this squad. Jason Richardson probably would have been that, but he wasn't injected in the starting lineup until first week of February, and then I was
going to say he's kind of become that guy for them.
He's become that guy coming off a bad game in their last round to get here. I expect the best from him moving forward. But look, they share the ball as well as anybody in the country. They have an identity. They're great in the fast break. They defend very well. They're good on the backboard. They do the element of the 3 ball gives them an added dynamic because they don't shoot it well. But they find ways to win despite it, much like St. John's did through the regular season to become Big East tournament and regular season champions. This team has all the parts because they can count on different guys. Yes, Jace Richardson's probably emerged, but there's a bunch of different weapons. Jay Nakins was the story to get them here to the second weekend. Trey Holloman is a 2-way guy that's such a disruptor coming off the bench that heats them up. I think Michigan State, with the path in front of them, a vulnerable 1 seed in Auburn, if they get Michigan, who I think knocks off Auburn, that way I'm going, there's a familiarity with the opponent there. And Ole Miss doesn't have enough offensively, and the guards of Michigan State can make it difficult on Sean Padula. I love the path of Michigan State. And when you get to the Final Four, anything is possible. So give me Michigan State. And I know you're not going to co-sign that one. Nicole, where are you going to go?
Well, Well, I'm not going to co-sign it because for our purposes, I think it's more interesting to talk about another team. But I will say Michigan State is in my national championship game in my
Oh,
bracket
wow.
that I
Okay.
filled out 5 minutes after Selection Sunday.
How many
So
brackets did you do? How many
I only
brackets?
did one. I only
Okay.
did one. I'm a one bracket purist, and I will say because I always feel like stuck to it. In our jobs, like a lot of people want your bracket like that night. So it's knee-jerk reactions, and then like you're just throughout the week, you're rethinking everything. But I stick to it. Like I stay with how I initially knee-jerk reaction filled out a bracket. And
One bracket kind of gal. I respect that.
Michigan State, though, I had them beating Auburn in this part of the region. Despite being a Michigan alum, I think that it would be great if Michigan were the team to knock off Auburn. I'm with you on the vulnerability of that team and certainly the way that they were playing coming into the tournament and then for lapses during the first weekend as well. But I like Michigan State. For all the reasons you outlined, it feels like it's the DNA of his Final Four teams in the past, and the teams that have gone the furthest. I've covered some of the ones that were supposed to get there. I've covered some of the ones that were surprises. And they check all those boxes this year. I'm going to tell you at least that I'm intrigued by Purdue. I know Houston is the best version of Houston under Kelvin Sampson. Like this is his best team and healthiest team and like best chance to win it all with the way that they play. As you mentioned, how tested they've been through the Big 12 this year and last. But Purdue is playing so well that first weekend. And I think that there's this narrative because of a couple years where they lost to double-digit seeds that Matt Painter's teams don't perform well in the tournament. Obviously, that should be gone after reaching the national championship game and all that they did last year. But there is such a toughness with the guards and the way that they play. Trey Kaufman-Renn and like the different stylistic stuff. Like Matt Painter is, first of all, one of the most interesting basketball coaches to talk to. But the way that he was breaking down how they had to change the way that they play without a Zach Edey this year was fascinating. And they really do play differently and they can win games in different ways. And I just feel like they're a team that everyone loves to pick against. And they looked great, I thought, in the first weekend in Providence.
To add to your confidence level with that pick, and I think this is fascinating, and I wonder if everybody else caught on to this, but we were there to watch Purdue take on McNeese, a McNeese team that just bullied a really good Clemson team right off the floor, and that one was decided in the first 10 minutes, despite a late comeback from Clemson. Too much was done in the first 10 minutes of dominant bully ball from McNeese. McNeese kind of took on the role of, I said, a St. John's, because St. John's was in that region. But it really had like a feel of a Houston with how McNeese played when they toppled Clemson.
Yeah,
well,
the physicality.
Coming in, a lot of people are like, well, McNeese could do that to Purdue. McNeese will turn over Braden Smith, which they did do a little bit. But they'll be bothered by the pressure, and Purdue will be on their heels, and McNeese will bully them right out of the gym. A lot of people thought that. This Purdue team came out, and that ball didn't stick. They fielded doubles. They played from one side of the court to the other. Fletcher Lawyer knocked down some big shots for this group. Trey Kaufman-Renn, I call him the collegiate Karl Malone. He's just a bully, low center of gravity, just a bull who gets his. He was a walk, 20 and 15, something like that. They got performances from the Colvins, from the Coxes. It was a total team effort. And so with that pressure, they were unbothered. With the physicality of McNeese, it's not quite Houston, but it's great prep. So they knew what it took to be the more physical team against McNeese, controlling that game. That gives them momentum going into Houston and say, hey, the same way we played, the same type of personnel with McNeese, it's going to be a little bit more talented of a group, but this is how we win. Ball can't stick. We got to make shots. We got to be tough on the backboard. We can be the aggressor. Iron sharpens iron, and we can advance. I think that's going to be a dogfight. Yeah. And as you mentioned, in Indianapolis, the backyard, West Lafayette is right just a couple miles north, 45 minutes north. They're going to travel. That's going to be a pro Boilermaker crowd. That's going to be a great one.
Yeah, those are my official picks. We'll see if it's the year that the Big Ten breaks 25-year championship drought. Jordan, this has been so much fun. Appreciate the time. And I'm so glad we got to do this. Enjoy the Sweet 16.
I am so glad we got to do this. So Nicole, I'm just going to put you on the spot right now. We're doing this next week. We got to recap what comes next week as well. I mean, me and you ran into each other. We knew we were going to be in that region. We said Providence. Too much to talk about. We got to go get this thing done.
We got to do it. Like in our profession, you only really talk to each other like on podcasts and on video and on people's shows. So we had to do it this way. But yes, we will absolutely have to do it next week.
Enjoy the second round, Nicole, and I'll be seeing you very soon to recap all the madness.